One thing that we got to pay attention to this week and how Florida is going to play from here on out. They take a loss to USF. Now, University of Southern Florida, we understood how good their team was, and the trajectory of their team at this point in time, that this wasn't going to be an easy game for Florida. It never is for any of those, anybody. I mean, over the last couple of years, they've always been worried. I believe they played, it was either Alabama or Georgia up to the ropes for like 3 quarters. I can't remember who it was, but they're used to dipping their toes in the SEC and the Power 4 schedules and playing teams really, really hard. And this year they got a quarterback. This year they got a defense. And this year, their coach is starting to put it together and getting a recruiting class, stealing some recruits from Florida and Miami and things like that. And so we're not here to talk about USF. We understand that Florida took a loss. We're here to talk about it. Should Billy Napier get fired? And I got some interesting statistics here for you guys to look at. I think this man's leash has been extremely too far stretched out for him to even remotely be the coach. And then they got to go to Death Valley, this weekend to play LSU. And it's not looking too hot. Here's what I'll say about Billy Napier. Let's go down the list. 2022, signed on to be their coach, coming from Louisiana, where he had a 40-12 record. Obviously, you should probably, if you got a record like that, you should probably be dipping your toe in the water to be a Power 4 coach somewhere. I don't think Florida fans are mad with the hire at first, but let's go through the top 25 records. These are the teams you're going to consistently play. Top 25 teams being the Florida Gators. It just is what it is. But your top 25 records so far here on out, 2022 was 1-5. Okay, first year, trying to get adjusted. You bring your guys in like Osiris Torrance and those guys, and maybe it's just, maybe he could put it together. 2023, hopefully it was better. You're 1-5 again in top 25 matchups. Not looking too hot. 2-10 against top 25 teams. 2024, 2-4. So you give me one game better than what we had last season, right? And then they haven't played a top 25 opponent until this week coming up for 2025. But overall, his overall record against top 25 opponents is 4-14. Yeah, you heard that right. Comparing that up against his overall record of 20-20. So almost half of your opponents since you've been a coach have been top 25 teams, which is tough, which is rough, but this comes with the territory of being the head coach of the University of Florida. He's 20-20. 1-1 in bowl games, not too bad. 50% only playing in 2. But my question always harkens back to something that we talked about before, guys. Is DJ Lagway still battling some injuries? He has not looked right. He has not looked right in the slightest. And I'm not saying that he is injured, or maybe he just is a couple steps slower than he actually was from before. But is the play calling of Billy Napier, which he says he's going to continue to call plays, is the play calling of Billy Napier holding this team back from actually being good in the future? I have no idea. I don't know. I'm very highly confused on if and why. When you look at just the records and the top 25 records alone, is this going to work out? So will he continue? I think Russ Callaway, who's their offensive coordinator, has been getting screwed. You're not even remotely trying to let him be creative and be a coordinator. I mean, this experiment of head coaches calling plays doesn't really work out too well. I think Mike Norvell's kind of learned that, and we see how Florida State's doing right now. I think a lot of these guys, even at the next level in the NFL, are starting to learn that head coaches calling plays is not sometimes the best move, and it's maybe a power struggle move. Maybe it's you don't want to hand the reins off to somebody that has not really been a coordinator, has been an analyst his whole career in Russ Callaway. But the teams that he's been analyst and interns for have been really good teams outside of one. Look, he was an analyst for the New York Giants little recently, but before that was an analyst, a defensive analyst, I believe, for Alabama under Nick Saban in the early 2010s, I believe it was. And then 2020, y'all remember who won the national championship, was one of the most dominant teams ever. He was a analyst for LSU during that run. So he's got to learn from a plethora of coaches, including having a NFL stint at some point. You would think the guy would know how to put a playbook together, would know how to, coordinate these guys to come and win on Saturdays. But Scott Strickland had came out with another statement very similar to what he said last year, so deep in the season before Florida started turning themselves around. Scott Strickland came out and said, "No, we're keeping Billy. We trust Billy. We're right behind him to just continue to lose." Look, I think after year 3, and you look at realistically, if you just looked at from what he did last year, he would be 19-21 at this point, right? 19-21 would be the overall record for the Gators. Nah, I'm sorry. It'll be 20. And I'm getting myself confused. Why is the math not math? He'd be 19-19. What am I talking about? He'd be 19-19 as it stands right now, and 4-14 still against top 25 opponents, which looks worse. Take 2 games off and it still looks worse. I don't know how you can just be a 500 coach at a program like this with that top 25 record and having such a promising quarterback. You're severely, I think you're stumping the growth of somebody like DJ. You're really one transfer portal period away from being a worse team if he transfers out. I think a lot of people in the country thought that you got really lucky by grabbing him during recruitment when he could have went off to a better team. I mean, let's think about Florida State or Miami right now with the DJ Lagway. They could be doing as good as they are now with his type of talent. I mean, time will tell. Maybe DJ's not as good as what people propped him up to be. But, like, if you look at those games last year that he came in and won, and the talent level of that guy, there's no reason why anybody in the country should have had any resolve that he wouldn't be good. And maybe the X factor in this whole situation is that Billy Napier himself is holding this guy back from being everything he can be. And it really makes you kind of sad that, if he's wasting this guy's talent. Who knows? And I hope Florida does the right thing. If this continues on, the fans don't deserve it at the end of the day. And I think what's happening is that the money side of it, because a lot of decisions get made like this, right? The money side of this situation is not matching up with the performance side. And so the money's not being affected. Neither will the coach be affected. And I don't know why they make this. If that's the correlation that they're making is the wrong correlation to make with the success of this team moving forward. I don't think that this is we're supporting Billy. The fans are behind Billy. I think this is more so like the fans want to see you win. They're always going to be behind you. There's such a really good fan base. And this is the result that you give them. I don't think this is going to last forever and people are going to start speaking with the wallets. But before that happens, I think a decision needs to be made sooner than later. You take a bad loss to LSU, right? You got to start thinking. But you have the perfect time, and I think you're losing these next 2 games pretty handedly. I think LSU is going to kick your ass, and I also think Miami's going to kick your ass after that, and those are 2 away games. Fire him on the road. Give him the send-off, send him on the Spirit Airlines flight back to wherever he came from. And then hit the bye week after that, which would be a perfect time for you to get everybody acclimated, get all your, your next coach in place, because you got to come and play Texas after that in Gainesville, then Texas A&M at Kyle Field, and then Mississippi State, who's been on a roll, before you hit another bye week to just go on and play Georgia, Kentucky, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Florida State. This is not a fun schedule for the Florida Gators. I'm sorry. Just put him out of his misery. At least he can relinquish the fact that we're looking for our next head coach so we can suck the rest of the year if that's the case, or to promote a head coach in his place that maybe will give you some wins that you probably shouldn't win, and then the spark of your team happens and you can start to see the turnaround, and maybe DJ Lagway, your superstar, and the rest of those guys, Trey Wilson and Dallas Wilson and all those guys, get a chance to be superstar. Jaden Ball and the rest of those guys. Run the ball. I've been seeing you Gators fans say that. Pretty clever.